Welcome to the Contractor Freedom Podcast. I'm your host, Jason Phillips. This show exists to help small business owners like you escape the tyranny of contractor prison and enter the bliss of contractor freedom so you can have the time, money, and freedom to live your life with purpose beyond your business. As a certified human behavior consultant in DISC personality styles and motivators, I'll be sharing with you skills for life, love, leadership, and business. I'll also be connecting you with experts that can help you scale your business and your life. So if you want to build the business and life of your dreams, then you are in the right place. Let's go. All right, welcome back, everybody. Today, I'm thrilled to introduce a special guest who is truly a beacon of innovation and leadership in the home service industry. Billy Kline, the owner of YourNewDoor.com, is here with us. Billy runs a family business in the DFW metro area, and Billy and I have been online friends for quite a while now, but we recently got to spend some time talking in person when he generally offered to take me to the airport in Austin rather than me hailing an Uber. So I really appreciate that, Billy. But Billy made a choice to a few years ago to eject the status quo in his business and to change the game. And since then, he's made some impressive strides in his business, and I'm sure that you are going to be inspired by his story. And one of the things that I really appreciate about Billy is how humble and hungry he is, and plus he's got a heart to give back and to help others. So Billy, welcome to the Contractor Freedom Podcast. It's fantastic to have you here with us today.
Hey, Jason, I appreciate you having me on. It's an honor. There's one thing in this world I like to talk about, it's business, right? I'm very awkward a lot of times when we get into social events or settings, right? Like, I don't want to talk about much. I don't like talking about baseball or sports much, but I want to talk about business. So if I can corner someone at a party or something like that wants to talk business, they can't shut me up. But otherwise, a lot of times sit around and don't say much. So I enjoy these.
If we revisit that little talk we had on the way to the airport, you told me the way your business used to be. Can you just give the listeners a glimpse of how did things used to be with your company and you?
Well, we spoke a little bit and I referenced that, the path that you're on and what you do and what you speak about contractor prison and breaking out of that. I was the epitome of that, right? Like my business owned me. I didn't have a business. I had a job really, right? And my number one goal every week was to sell enough jobs to make payroll, right? And it was really one of those scenarios where I couldn't afford to take a day off. I couldn't miss a day. If something went wrong on a job where we didn't get paid for that job, we were going to miss payroll. And, it was always something, right? Like it was literally what you hear and what you think when someone talks about being a firefighter in their business. Now, honestly, it probably was a good exercise for me to go through because now when something's on fire around here, I just sit around and, I don't get excited about it because I've been through way worse, right? So, but it was literally, 5 alarms every day, just trying to keep the wheels on the bus. Somebody doesn't show up, somebody messed up a project, something was missold or whatever, right? So it was always something. And I just got tired of it one day. Honestly, almost quit. My wife and I went to church. And we stopped at, I'll never forget it. We stopped at Burger Street on the way back from church and had a conversation that we were going to quit offering a certain aspect of our business just because it was just so burdensome. And I was ready to quit. And I'm glad that I didn't because in 3 or 4 instances in my life, I've been right at that edge to where things were, ready to quit. And it's like, it was literally like just that was the edge that we broke over and things started to break open for us and change mostly my mindset and my attitude. But it really, after I got over not quitting and getting over that, it was like the skies opened up and, God was ready for us to do, what we were supposed to do.
Billy, has there been a time can you take us back to a time, and maybe that was it, when you felt completely, overwhelmed by your business and it brought you to maybe even a breaking point?
How long are we recording today, right? It was, the interesting thing for me is I feel like, not to pat myself on the back or anything, I feel like I've come out of that place relatively quickly, right? Like it's one of those things like a reform story. Someone's in prison and they get out and totally change their life and become, millionaires or whatever. I was literally felt like I was stuck in prison. A lot of times I was wearing all the hats still. I was doing all the sales. I had people for things, but I was too dumb and too stubborn to turn loose and let them do their job, right? Without micromanaging. It was just always, fires and always felt like I needed to be a part of everything. And then one day what really broke it open for me was I realized that I had a broken mind, right? Like I was raised by people who were raised by people who went through the Great Depression, right? And And generationally that carries over. And my parents, it wasn't something they did wrong or, were necessarily trying to do to me. But growing up, I always heard that costs too much. That won't work. Can't do that. Right. There was never enough money for anything, but, the thing, cigarettes and things like that, right? Like they always had money for that. Gas was always too expensive. The rent was always too expensive. And what I realized was I had that in me. And I went to buy a van, right? Like I had bought one at the beginning of COVID before things went crazy, just before COVID. It was like $35,000, right? Very reasonable. 18 months after that, during COVID, I went and bought two more and they were almost 60,000. And I was like, there's no way they're worth that. But what I got to thinking about a couple days later was like, I'm an idiot because if I don't want to spend 60,000 for the van, it's not that. It's $1,000 a month payment, right? So by not wanting to pay $1,000 a month payment, it's costing me $50,000 or $60,000 in revenue that I'm not going to be able to get. So right then I realized that I had a broken mindset and I was going to do anything in my power to fix that. And it started by becoming curious, right? Reading books, going to events, seeking out mentors, listening to people smarter than me, and podcasts really opened my whole mind to, successful people. And it is as simple as that sounds. It really does starts to grease the wheels in your mind and change your mindset. And all these gurus that are out here and all the things, the number one thing that they may disguise or you may not realize they're selling you is a mindset. They can help you fix your mindset, take credit for it. They charge you for it, but you really don't need a guru to help you fix your mindset. You just have to make your mind up and decide that today is the day that I am changing. I don't know the answers. I don't have the answers. I will seek the answers out. And just like in the Bible,
That's
ask and
right.
ye shall receive. Seek and ye shall find. When you start looking for the answers, they mysteriously show up. When the student is ready, the teacher
That's
will
right.
appear, right?
You-
And that's literally
That's
all
the
about
problem,
mindset.
Billy, with mindsets is they cloak themselves in logic. Broken mindsets. That's too expensive. But we're asking the wrong question. It's not how much does it cost? It's in that case, it's what am I missing out on by not spending this money? With your van question, right? And switching to an investment.
Absolutely.
Some people will say it's an unlimited mindset or a surplus mindset or whatever it is, but man, that's a key. And what's crazy is we can see limited mindsets in others, but we can't see them in ourselves. I literally, maybe you've been through the same thing. I've literally went through a time, and I still pray this prayer from time to time, but I literally went through a time where I prayed every day, God, I want you to open up my thinking. Help me think bigger. Help me to see my own limitations. Man, that's a great story. So before that, back in the day, I guess you were striving to meet payroll, right? And then you recognized you had a limited mindset, which kudos to you, man, for doing that. So along this change, what personal sacrifices have you had to make along the way?
All of them, right? It really kind of got bad there for a while financially. And when you mention personal sacrifices, the ultimate personal sacrifice to me would be divorce, right? Or losing my spouse over these types of things. And, in a marriage, finances are very important, right? And I was taking money out of our personal account to make payroll sometimes and all the things. And I wasn't communicating that with my spouse. And I was ashamed, right, of the fact that number one, I had maybe stuck my neck out too far, or that I was a failure. I wasn't doing enough to do whatever it would take to make payroll. So I would write the checks to payroll and I would slowly pull it back in. And my wife was trusting me to do the finances and all things. And that really led to some tough conversations and some tough moments in my marriage, right? And, shined a light into who I was, who I wanted to be. And that wasn't, if that was who I had to be a successful business person to hide things from my wife, it's not worth the sacrifice there. It's not worth that. And, that probably was a big catalyst into, me sitting in a quiet place and wondering to myself, what I should do, what's next, how do I overcome this? And a lot of times when you have these realizations, if you haven't already met someone or have a mentor or someone to speak to, kind of on an island by yourself, because you don't know what you don't know, right? And you don't know that you can be successful in what you're doing. One of the biggest reasons we weren't successful for so long is because I didn't know I wasn't priced right, right? Like it's the age old thing. Why does it for this much? I'll do it for a little bit less, right? And when you're a solo guy, working out of your truck or out of your own garage or whatever, you can get away with that for a while. You can make a bit of a living doing that because you don't have any overhead or any other expenses. But at a certain point, when you look up, oh, now I've got 8 people and I'm still doing it the same way. It doesn't
We
work.
say you can build a
right?
busyness with low GP.
but you're not going to build an
Correct.
organization and get out of, contractor prison that way. The story,
That's your
one
solitary
of the things,
alignment.
Billy, that's passionate for me is, I don't want to help people scale their business. Well, I do, but really what I want to do is elevate lives, because there's plenty of people that have scaled their business and burned their home life, burned their health. And you're smart enough that you've realized that, before it was too late or early on or whatever. But, my business caused a lot of stress in my marriage, and my wife is, thank God, she's a champ and very patient. But it has been the ruin of many relationships, and it's sad. And I hate to see that. And it ought not to be that way. Right. So,
It doesn't have to. It doesn't have to be. And the biggest issue is if you have a spouse that loves you and believes in you, right? Like my wife has always had my back. But what happened, especially in that time I was mentioning earlier, is it erodes that trust, right? Like that's a good way just to lose all the trust. But all these little things, they believe in you so much, and then it's just negativity, it's just problems, it's just financial issues. So it erodes that trust, and eventually, it gets to a point where you can't ever get it back. Luckily, I never totally lost that, and we turned things around. And, now my wife's my biggest cheerleader and supporter and fan, and, blindly follows me, through whatever. But my wife is also my biggest secret weapon, right, in all this, because her gut feelings have made me and lost me more money than anything else in my life. It's made me more money when I've listened to it, and it's lost me more money when I went against it, right? That's usually when
yep,
something
yep.
bad happens. So intuition is a very powerful tool if you happen to have that in your life.
So you could have stayed with the status quo of how you had been doing everything, and it had been working. Maybe it wasn't like sustainable. It was obviously sustainable for a number of years, and you went through this moment of, wow, I've got a limiting mindset, and you all of a sudden get real hungry for learning, right? Along the way, have there been any significant, setbacks or obstacles that made you feel like, man, I don't know if I'm good enough. I don't know if I can overcome this.
Yeah, for sure. And it was the awakening for me started to happen with my mindset and opening up my eyes to the fact that the culture wasn't where we needed to be. Just all the things that go along with bad days, right? Like someone couldn't cash their check or whatever, right? It was always, something. And it was, along that time when I decided that I couldn't do everything, right? Like you reach the limit of what you can manage as one person, right? And at that point in time, I needed to start working and worrying about leadership and how to do this. And I kind of marked time, right? Like in history, we talk about BC and AD, right? Like before Christ and Until Domini or whatever. And in my business, I have a mark in the stand, and that's when I hired Dan, right? Like I hired Dan. Dan was he's still here. He's my operations manager. And Dan started to he took on a lot more than he needed to, but he started to take on anything in the business that was not a revenue generating product or project, right? Like whatever it was, there's hundreds of things every day. And when I was able to get that off my plate and put it on Dan, looking up insurance and just setting things up and all the things, it freed me up to start focusing on the thing. And I don't know where I came up with this revelation in my life, but one of the things that we started doing was working off of a framework, right? So I knew that I wasn't priced right. And I knew that, I was going to be stuck wherever I was at until we started generating more revenue, but not just necessarily revenue, but profit. And I went to an event Tommy Mello put on. I think it was his second or third big event that he had ever put on. And I heard this woman speak. Her name was Megan Light. She was an accountant and whatever. And also Ellen Rohr. I don't know the listener familiar with Ellen Rohr, but she's a legend in the home service space as an accountant, right? Like that's the thing. But they were all talking about gross profit and all things, your P&Ls, all kind of new to me, right? Like all these things that I'm starting to learn about. So I started learning about that. So I wouldn't recommend anybody do this blindly, but I went home and I raised my prices 40%. I just went into my price book, adjust the prices, bulk edit, 40% apply to all, and closed my eyes and grit my teeth. And suddenly things started to get a little better. And what was interesting, I've always been afraid of we're all afraid to raise our prices because we think that, the customers aren't going to buy, but customers don't buy or not buy because of your price. They buy or not buy because they either see or don't see the value in what you're trying to do for them. Right. And it was just all these things, all culmination of learning how to sell better, learning how to price better, learning how to be helpful instead of salesy, right? All these things just all started to come together. Profit really does cure all. When you start having a little bit of money left over, you can start to pay things frameworks I was talking about were helpful in us kind of coming out of the wilderness, so to speak. I still use that term around here because a framework for me is basically an outline, right? Like the framework for payroll or the framework for sales, right? And at the top of the outline, you have the subject, sales. And you have Roman numeral 1, 2, 3, and 4. What is the bare minimum thing that I can put in there to work with, right? So growing a business on your cash flow is incredibly difficult because there's always something that needs financial attention. Without, investing, someone injecting money in your business or a loan or whatever, doing it on your cash flow is really hard. But we would do orbits around the business with the leftover cash flow, and we would spend a little bit on everything. It took us a long time, but we would spend just a little bit on everything, every orbit around. If we spent too much on marketing, we didn't have enough sales guys to back it up. If we spent too much on sales, we didn't have enough marketing to keep all the sales guys busy, all the things. So we would just continue to orbit the business with our money and pay a little bit here, pay off a little something that was nagging us or whatever, and just keep paying things off as we went and, making 1% improvements a day. And over time now, things are much bigger and much better. We still have that philosophy of trying to make things 1% better per day. But today, that 1% is a much larger piece at 1% than it was then because the whole thing is much larger, right? So it really is just, everything kind of came together all at once, and we've come so far since 2021. So in 3 years, basically, it's the difference, but in going from to the moon and to Mars, it's just amazing.
So Billy, how many years were you in business before this epiphany?
I've been in self-employed and, some sort of home improvement, stuff, kitchens and baths and things like that since 2002, really. I started doing installations for Home Depot in 2002, door installation. I did that for 2 or 3 years, and I did kitchens and baths. And in 2008, I started DFW door repair, right about the time I married my wife. And then wandered around in the dark, doing that for almost 15 years, right? Just making a living, getting by and making it hard on myself. And then in the last 2 years, 3 years really is exponential to what we probably did more already this year than we did in the first 10 years combined.
Wow. Incredible.
Crazy.
Incredible. So, there's a lot of pressure running a business, right? When the pressure is really on, how do you deal with it? How do you come to peace or not blow up?
So I have this, and I share this with my installers a lot of times, and everybody that works here really. There were a lot of times when I was doing the installations or doing the work where it would be 6:00 in the evening. I've still got 3 hours or 4 hours to go on a project, right? And just hating life, don't want to be there, want to be anywhere but there, hungry, all things. But the one thing that I would tell myself is no matter what, tomorrow morning, I'm going to wake up in my bed next to my wife. The day's going to start over and everything's going to be just fine. Compartmentalize it to that period of time. It's not going to kill you. It may suck and it may be, financially difficult or whatever it is, but not promised, obviously. But tomorrow is a new day. And if you just compartmentalize those problems and deal with them and move on, then it makes, it's not something that has to hang around, right?
Nice.
You can deal with it and move on. Going through that pressure cooker of all those years with all those problems now, it's really hard to get me rattled around here, And I've got a lot of junior leaders that are coming up and trying to, they'll come to my door and ask me, questions like wanting me to give them the answer. And I'll just look at them and I'm like, are you sure you want me to get involved in this? What do you think I would do? Right. Like,
yeah.
Just to help them to get to the point where they trust themselves and, feel confident in answering those
things. And
man,
it can be tough because you've got, customer problems, you've got cash flow problems, legal problems, people problems on your own team, and it can really be a pressure cooker.
Well, what helped me out the most was kind of subdividing my company into silos, right? Like 4 to 6 silos. We've got the call center, really intake and HR. We've got sales, we've got dispatch, and we've got fulfillment, and then we've got production, right? The guys that make the thing. And having a leader in each one of those silos in my company, I used to do something, or if not everything, in every one of those silos in my company. And having someone that understands my vision, right? And understands the objective and what we're trying to achieve believe in each one of those. Also our culture and how I want to handle business. I don't worry about the day to day that much anymore, but having someone in each one of those silos that can basically run that silo and that sector of the business like its own business and then report back to me on, what's going on really was another one of those frameworks that we came up with. It's not, anything revolutionary, but that's just how we kind of decided to do things. So now I enjoy getting back in the day to day now. This week, one of my door experts, his wife had a baby, their first baby. So I got to do sales to fill in for him while he was out. And I can't tell you, people are looking at the door, they're like, you've been on the phone with this customer for way too long, and if we're on the phone for 45 minutes with a guy today, 30 of it was just being happy and talking about life and business, and 15 about the project. So I really love what I do. I love the people here. I love our story. Now I want to create a legacy. And the reason I think maybe you had asked earlier what, or maybe you were going this way with it, what my purpose is now. I want to, if this business never grew another dollar and stayed this size for the rest of my career, I would live just fine, right? And it's not money that motivates me now for me. I want to take my people with me along for the ride. So we want to build a business that we can go as far into the future as we can go financially, to where the people that have devoted their lives to help fulfill my vision get to participate in whatever comes next financially. And that's what motivates me now to continue.
Man, that is wonderful. When you touched on, Billy, that, you've got these silos, and in our company, we call them departments, whatever, but those major functions of the company, when you can delegate those out, it's life-changing. And I say that when you delegate, everybody wins, but so many contractors struggle to make that first hire. Typically that's like like you have a production facility. Most of the guys that listen to this podcast don't have a production facility. Some do for cabinet painting, but their first hire might be a project manager to go out in the field and manage the multi-day projects, ensure that the promises were delivered and the money was collected and all of that. And I run them through a simple math formula. Hey guys, what do you think it's going to take financially for a whole year to pay a project manager? Pick a number. What is it? Is it 50? Is it 100,000? What is it? 75? What is it? Well, they'll give me a number and I say, okay. And I just run them through. Well, let's say it's $75,000. Okay. In a whole year, how many more projects would you have to produce to just cover that with gross profit? Let's forget about what it does to the net margin, but just to cover that with gross profit. Well, maybe, they might say, $150,000 more, which is typical. Okay. So if for $150,000 more project, your projects are average of, say, what are they? 10,000 a piece, 5,000, so you've got 15 more projects. How many more leads do you need to run to get 15 more projects in the whole year? I don't know, 45, 50. Okay, so let's just say appointments to get 15 projects. I just back them into it. So you're telling me one more appointment a week, you could sell 15 projects, and for one more appointment, and you could delegate all of your project management out, all of it. And their eyes are just completely open. Okay, so then the question is, well, can you get one more appointment a week? Oh yeah, I can do that.
Absolutely.
So thinking about that on an annual basis, I'm sure you had your own version of that when you hired the guy's name you mentioned earlier, Dan.
Yeah,
How
Dan.
did that thought process and decision process go for you?
I had already, obviously, up to that point, we had, I think, 6 or 8 people. Honestly, hiring an operations manager at the size I was then, really looking back, was a reach, right? Like a big reach, because his salary request coming in was way more than I was paying myself or anyone else in the business at the time. But can't tell you how much it opened my eyes. There's a guy who wrote a book called Buy Back Your Time. His name is Dan Martell. And before his book was written or all the things, that's basically what I was doing by hiring Dan. I was buying back my time. I was taking the things off my plate that weren't generating revenue, which allowed me to focus on things that generated revenue, which I didn't, and the one thing that I learned from my friend Tommy Mello early on, reverse engineer everything, just like the exercise you just went through, right? So if you can, with your marketing, with your sales, with anything, I know exactly how many leads I need to hit my yearly goal. I know exactly how much, we need to spend to do that. I know exactly what our average ticket is every day, all the things. I don't know what our close rate needs to be. Have to know those things in order to hit a goal. Don't have a goal and you don't reverse engineer it, you're going to hit it. You're not going to hit it because you're aiming at nothing. And I used to be one of those guys that would think I could take a box full of receipts to my accountant at the end of the year and find out if I made money or not. Hope I didn't owe any tax, right? And then when my eyes were open, I was like, you mean I can decide how much money I want to make the end of the year, January, and then back out of it? I was like, bro, that was such a liberating process to learn how to do that. Even though it's simple, most guys don't think that big. We all think very linear and instead of in dimensions. And I still catch myself, I'll think about something, I'm like, that's a linear thought. I think you need to kind of bend your mind around it a little bit more and not think in a straight line. So on more complex issues. So being able to do that and knowing that the word gross profit that you mentioned earlier is the most important word, the most important KPI. You don't know what KPI is, look it up, but it's the most important one in your business. If your gross profit or your gross margin is lower than 40%, you're probably not going to make it unless whatever you're selling doesn't require a lot of input after the sale.
Raise your prices.
Right.
Raise your prices. That's what I always say. So these days, Billy, you're not making doors, you're not installing doors. And I mean, so the skill set that you started with is not the skill set you need to succeed now. So
Absolutely not.
what skills do you think are important or not think, do you know are important in your current role?
So what I realized, the really interesting part is once I devoted myself to being a student of business, a student of life, a student of leadership, it'll change. It's a lifestyle, right? Like it really is. Become a different person. Your thoughts and habits become different. You start, for me, and I've seen this a lot. I became interested in my health and my fitness and my wellness. And, I've started down that road last year late and, just all these things become much easier when you start to do this stuff. But for me now, I still build things, right? But what I build are leaders. And my vision, and I use this word vision a couple times. I'll do a caveat here. If you don't have a vision for your company, your people aren't going to know why they're doing what they're doing, right? So you have to personally, if you're the leader, you have to have a vision. Without a vision, the people will perish, right? And you have to have a vision. Your vision and your dreams have to be big enough for your people to fit inside. You have to share that vision with them often and, remind them what this is all about. And then when you use your vision to decide who gets to stay on the bus or not, right? And if you have people in your business that are doing things, aren't supporting the vision, right? Like causing problems, not showing up or whatever, you remind them of the vision. They still don't want, that's when you can get them off. And then you can, you got A players that are killing it. They're supporting the vision. Those are the ones you want to promote. So now my job is to walk around here, cast the vision, alter the vision as things change, right? Rescale, resize the vision as things get bigger. Goals are always on the horizon. And the interesting about the horizon is always the same distance away, right? So the closer you get to your goal, the further away the horizon. So you always have to keep shifting your focus and your perspective. And most of us don't think big enough. And so now my goal is to scale the company. We're looking at going to other markets around Texas and then hopefully an opportunity to do national things. And the one thing that I realized that I don't have are leaders. In order to scale and grow, I have to have leaders. And so now we do a leadership book club. We do it 2 or 3 times a month, usually on Fridays. We do every Friday morning, we have breakfast here. And we cook breakfast for a whole team every Friday morning at 7:30. And we talk about the book that we're reading. And we start to identify people who are exhibiting qualities of leadership that we want and that are starting to step up, people that we hired for just general labor or whatever, and their teammates start to notice, or we start to notice that, hey, they're kind of going above and beyond. They're doing a little bit more than is asked, or they care. You can tell when someone cares and when someone doesn't. So in order for us to scale and grow, I've got to develop these people into leaders, junior leaders first, and then, see where that takes us. But that's the one thing that's for sure. You're not going to grow without leadership, whether it's you and a team of 8 or you and a team of 800, right? You've got to have some level of leadership, some way to expand your leadership as influence, and leaders get paid. That's what I tell my people. If you really want to make a lot of money here, become a leader, teach everybody what you know that's in your sphere of influence, and the money will just show up because you're exponentially exchanging your time for value. And I don't want to pay you for your time. I want to pay you
And
for
that's
your
great.
value.
That is fantastic. Has there been a time when you made a difficult decision? Maybe it went against conventional wisdom?
Well, as far as a business
Yeah, a
decision
business decision.
or what? Yeah, probably every day, bro. I'm a little bit of a rogue or a maverick. I'm going to tell you a little story here about myself and I don't want it to come out and make it sound like I'm egotistical or anything like that. But I clearly understood that I thought different than other people when I was in the 3rd grade. And this is going to sound like a weird story. It's wild, but we had a field day at school. And during that field day, it rained. One of the events that they took us to do in the gymnasium, sorry about that. One of the events that they took us in the gymnasium to do was a golf ball toss, right? Like we were supposed to roll the golf ball on the gym floor and get it as close to the center of the gym floor as possible. Well, everybody gets up, we're all at the end of the court. Everybody just throws their golf ball as hard as they can. Of course, it goes all the way sailing to the other end of the court. And I just go up there and I see this and I'm observant, right? And I just roll mine gently and it stopped right in the middle. And I know that sounds like a weird story, but I knew that I thought different than everyone else at that point, and I still exercise that. I don't know if it's a blessing or a curse, but I look at things, I try to look at things and bend my thoughts around instead of, like I mentioned earlier, a linear path. What I'm doing with this story, just kind of take it a long way around the wall here, but it allows me to see things from a different perspective, take chances that aren't necessarily always as big a chance as you would think they would be, just because I've got a little bit of a perspective that I wouldn't have if I was just looking straight ahead. And, like the building we just moved into, we bought the building that we were in last September. We were going to add, 6,000 or 7,000 square feet to it. It was going to take about a year to do. I know more than closing that building in September and November, I decided it wasn't going to work because it was going to take us 18 months to build it out. And then we were going to have to move anyway because we were going to outgrow it at the pace we were at. So I'm like, well, great. Now I've got this mortgage over here and we need to move into a bigger facility. We went from paying $6,000 a month where we're at to paying $20,000 a month where we're at now. So that's a pretty big jump, and it's a pretty big commitment for a guy who's like at one point in the last, handful of years couldn't even make payroll, right? So it was a scary jump, but it's one of those things where I took a chance, and now we've almost already outgrown the 15,000 square foot we're in now. And, we've only been here for 7 months. So it's things like that, pop
Incredible.
up pretty often.
You need
around
leaders. 100%. So are there any misconceptions, or what's a misconception about business that you've had to overcome? There was a lot of things that people told me, or that when I had first started in the business. What about you?
This is something that I work on with my people. Managers manage outcomes and leaders manage thoughts and hearts, right? Like I want to be a leader. I want to connect with my people and understand what makes them tick, right? Joel's been late a couple days this week. A manager wants to write him up, but I want to go and ask him, hey, is everything okay at your house? Is anything going on that, and then you find out, he's going through some trouble with his wife or his daughter's sick or whatever. And then you get to exercise a level of empathy there and compassion instead of the rule book. And, we all need to do that as we go and as we grow. If you want to have a culture where people are happy to come to work and happy to do the things to support your vision. And that's important to me. And it's important to me that the people that I continue to train to be leaders, I'm not the best leader in the world. It's something I work on every single day, but it's also something that I want the people around me to work on every day too. That we ask everyone that works here, from myself to the guy that sweeps the floors, we all read the same books and on leadership and go through the same things, because you never know who's going to pop up or who could have the opportunity to be the leader, because most organizations, they just manage people, they manage outcomes, and they manage the numbers. And if you happen to show up on time every day and you get them 7% cost of living raises every year or whatever it is, if you're lucky, they'll make you a company man. I want to make people wealthy that are here devoting their lives and their careers to my vision. I don't take that lightly. And I'm not going to do it by standing out there with a clipboard saying you were 6 minutes late today.
Yes.
Right. It's important to have standards. Don't get me wrong. Right. And it's important to enforce the standard, but it's also important to do that with a measure of empathy and
that is great. Reminds me of we talk about the Bible, the letter of the law and the spirit of the law. So leadership book club, what's a favorite leadership book or two?
Yeah. So if we're talking if our audience is people who are really just kind of getting started, right? Like who don't know where to start, the number one book that I always recommend to everyone before you read anything else, if you've not read any leadership books or sales books or whatever it is, right, is How to Win Friends and Influence. It was written, I believe, in the late 20s or early 30s, and it's a 5th grade reading level. It's highest and probably even lower than that from a comprehension level, but the principles in it are timeless. And it really is a good foundation for anyone that is looking to have an understanding on how to deal with people, how to talk to people, how to get people to do, achieve your objectives or your vision or whatever, how to get a stubborn mule, to do things, right? And that's one. And, something that I kind of recently doubled back on is a mindset book, right? Like we had already gone through 2 or 3 books and I could see that some of the things didn't seem to be sticking with my people. And what I realized was they also needed mindset training too, right? And so we stopped and we went back to, now we're reading a book that's a little bit more about mindset and less about leadership, because I want the people to be able to not just read the books, right? This is why, and maybe there's a revelation in there where they'll see, oh, you know what? I do think like that, or you know what? I could. And what I promise my people is that they'll do the things that I ask them to do and listen to the things that I'm trying to teach them. Even if they move on from this place, they're going to be light years ahead of their peers, and wherever they go to work. And if you get somebody that shows up somewhere where there's no leadership or thoughts about it, someone shows up that has a little bit of that and can lead people, they're going to get promoted really fast and be way ahead of anyone else
That's
in
right.
that position. It's just not out there. It's not taught. It's very cherished, but no one takes the time to instill it into their people.
That's good. One of the questions I like to ask is, obviously this is the Contractor Freedom Podcast, and everybody gets to define what freedom means to them. What does freedom mean to Billy Kline?
Freedom to me is being able to, I'm starting to achieve a little bit of this, so it's probably easier for me to put that out there. But in the beginning, freedom is being able to make payroll and sleep at night, right? Like on Friday nights. It used to be, I had mobile deposit on my thing and I would have to stick around till everybody got back. And if there was any checks that needed to be deposited on Friday or Thursday or whatever, right? And sometimes I would do that and I would forget. I would have it in my pocket or in my truck, and at like 9 o'clock at night, I would raise up and be, oh my gosh, I forgot to deposit the checks. And I had till 10 p.m. to do it, but I was just thinking about it a couple of days ago. I'm like, oh my gosh, that's totally gone from my life. I forgot how much stress that was, or pressure. And the one time that you forget to do it, how it just messes everything up, So being able to command your time instead of your time commanding you is really the biggest asset that you'll get back, because our time is the one thing that's the most valuable thing that we have. Can't make any more. We can't get any more, and really important not to waste it. And right now I'm personally working on, how we all get home and we all kind of like pick out and we check our social media or whatever, where, you look up and you've been sitting there staring at your phone for an hour, right? All these things that we do to manage our time in all these other places, and then we go and give it all back, So I'm personally working on that. I'm building a personal framework out right now to help me stay on track. So when I get home, yeah, if I want to sit there for half an hour, that's fine. But this is what I still have to achieve today. These are the 3 objectives I want to achieve and whatnot. But being able to own your time and not let your time on you, being able to financially take care of your family, right? To be all the things that we always promised ourselves that we would be for our family financially and with our time. You know, if there's any younger contractors out there, that have younger children that are working, 60, 70, 80 hours a week just to make sure that they make it through that and to take care of their family. I used to do that. And now my youngest is 17 and going into his senior year of high school. And I don't get too weepy or anything, but I have sat around and cried more than once about the time that I'm not going to have with them anymore. So if you've got young people, young children, a young family, don't trade the time you have with them for money, because you would give any amount of money when you get older to have those moments back. And, the best way to keep from any of this happening is to learn as much as you can, as early as you can. It's important to make the mistake. It's important to go through these problems so you'll understand how to deal with them when they do come up. Not a matter of if, but when. But having those experiences will help you to navigate that. And it never gets easy, but it gets easier, right? And you learn how to manage problems. You learn how to manage your people. And just the knowledge that you gain by going through all that is a really valuable byproduct of what it means to, to succeed and to be able to do whatever you want to do.
So if you could look back and visit the Billy 20 plus years ago, knowing what you know now, what one piece of advice would you want to give old Billy? Young Billy.
Start sooner. Yeah, start sooner. this is what I was, you know, I didn't, listen, here's a little backstory about me. I thought I was going to be a professional bass fisherman, right? Until I was in my late 30s, maybe early 40s. I'm 46 now. And I would burn the world down to make sure that I got to go to these competitions and all things at the expense of my finances, at the expense of my kids' sporting events, all the things in relation to time, right? And the time it took. I was very successful at it, relationally speaking. I won a lot of money. But what it cost me was opportunity cost and time cost. And I could have won every event I ever entered. And now I still do it a little bit, but the opportunity cost for me to go and take the time off to go and be able to compete at a high level cost so much more than any amount that I could ever win because of what I've done here and what I'm building. So now, it's one of those things where we look at it in terms of value versus output versus input, right? And so if I could go back and tell myself anything, and I tell this, my 31-year-old stepson works here, his wife, I've got 60%, maybe 70% of my staff is under 30 years old. And it's what I always tell them. Don't waste time. Start learning about investing in real estate. Start learning about, all these things to better yourself. Had I started when I was 25, you guys wouldn't even know me now. I'd be, living on an island somewhere sipping Mai Tais because I'd be a billionaire, right? And it's really interesting because when you start to do these things, it can happen for you really fast. It'll snowball really fast because, just 2 years ago, probably we were still struggling to make payroll, even though we had started to, down this journey and down this path of change and learning and knowledge, we still hadn't caught up with our revenue from our raising our prices. So we were still, chasing that down. So start as early as you can, become curious, about things you don't know and things that you need to know. The old thing, you don't know what you don't know, but listen, get in rooms that are bigger than you and do whatever you got to do to get there. Pay the money to go to the event, pay the money to get in the room, pay the money to, have access to these people that have already done what you've already done. There's a cost associated with it because the very first event I ever went to, we use a software here, a CRM called ServiceTime. And in April of 2022, they had this event. Maybe it was 2021. I think it was 2022. 2021. They have an event called Pantheon. So if you're a ServiceTime subscriber, you can buy a ticket to go to Pantheon. They have all these speakers. It's huge, right? It's a huge event. And my account manager gave me 2 tickets, right? They were like $1,200 a piece. And I'm like, could not have went. Really, financially, it was still tough for us to go to buy the plane tickets and the hotels and stuff. But I had a mindset when I went that I was going to hear all the things that I've been hearing on the podcast, right? But what I underestimated and what I didn't realize was I would get to meet some of these people that spoke, also other people that were at the event that were just like me. And the value that came from being able to network with people and to connect with people that were going through something similar to me, who understood my problem, had already tackled some of these problems, bro, it moved the needle for me by light years, right? Like I met a couple of people, I could call them up and be like, hey, I'm going through this. They were like, oh, this is what you need to avoid what's coming down the road, right? And just being able to do that there's no amount of money you can really calculate on what that's worth to you in terms of saving time and creating value for your people in a
Man,
quick
that
way.
is a great story. I can second that. Every time I've spent money to get in the room with others, it's turned out to be a huge ROI for me. Well, Billy, man,
I've paid $50,000, right? Like just recently, just a couple months ago, we went to an event. It was my wife and I both to go. It was $15,000. And now it gets a lot easier as you grow and scale a little bit. But I promise you, I've already implemented some of the things I learned that have probably made me well into the double 6 figures, just from some of the things that I learned from people who have already, doing tens and
instead of
hundreds of
you
millions a year.
continuing the trial and error forever, why not learn from someone else, right? Their mistakes, their wins. Yeah, that's right.
Nothing new
There's
under
nothing
the
new under
sun.
the sun. Well, I'll tell you, I think we're about out of time here. Man, this has been wonderful chatting with you. What is the best way for any of our listeners to get in contact with you if someone wants to connect?
Right now, the best way is Facebook. My handle is Billy the Door Guy Kline. I have a full-time social media person in our office who is also a graphics designer, and she's convinced me to start mine on TikTok and Instagram. So we'll be on there soon. We're going to start putting out content. Much like you, I have a heart for helping contractors and helping business people figure out, what's next or how to get started, right? Like when I started this journey, I had no clue who to listen to. I had no clue what to do. There's not really any best practice or service organization for my vertical like there is for heating and air and plumbing. You can get a playbook anywhere in those types of verticals, but we kind of had to just kind of Frankenstein it together. And it took me a while to figure out who to trust, who to listen to, who was blowing smoke, who was just trying to get my money. And so I want to help people cut that off, right? And filter out the noise. So we're going to start putting out content and talking about things. We're not charging any money. There's no subscriptions. There's no nothing. I'm not a guru. I just want the help. So, and I know that guys like you, especially you, and my friend Tommy Mello, you guys want to help too. And you're doing things for contractors to help hold them, really get them to open their eyes first, right? Half of them, more than half, most of them don't know that they just are being dummies, really. And there's a formula. Business is math, right? And once you figure out, there's only 4 or 5 inputs that you really need to put in there to build a framework to have a profitable business. But until you do, it's going to be really hard. So we're going to start putting out content to help people figure out where to start, how to filter out the noise, who to listen to, who's worth paying for and who's not. So right now it's Facebook, Billy Kline, Billy the Door Guy Kline. You can email me, billy@yournewdoor.com. And that
is
really
great. We will make sure, and listeners, we will make sure and put those links along with this podcast episode. And hey, before we close, I should probably mention this would be a great time to go ahead and register for our Contractor Freedom Summit that's coming up in Dallas in September. And after talking to Billy, it sounds like I need to raise the price on it, but no, it is a great time. We'll include the link to the summit as well. If you want to connect with some amazing people and continue your journey out of contractor prison and into contractor freedom, I want to invite you to join us. And again, Billy, back to you, man. Thanks for connecting today. Look forward to spending more time with you. You're one amazing guy, man, and I wish you all the success in the world, buddy.
Awesome. I'm going to hit you up. We're putting together a podcast as well, so I'll have you on mine.
I would love that. So, y'all have a great day. Till we see you next time. Bye-bye.
Hey, contractors, I want to invite you to connect. If you want to get connected with the Contractor Freedom community, simply point your browser to contractorfreedom.live. That's contractorfreedom.live. On there, you'll find the link to our Facebook private group, our page, our newsletter. You'll find a link to our podcast. So I just want to invite you to come on over, join the community. I look forward to getting to know you more. Thanks for listening in today. Ball.